After the major keyboard factories launched their own innovative new mechanical keyboard switches, there are various kinds of mechanical keyboard switches on the market. In addition to the fact that the Cherry switches remain in the strongest market position, we found that many gamers prefer some of the newer switches. After our survey and investigation, box switches and prism switches are the preferred among them. So why are these switches preferred by gamers? Let's do some comparisons. The box switches everyone refers to are Kaihua box switches. We picked box white switches for comparison. For optical switches, we picked the 3rd generation Bloody LK Libra optical switches, and the Prism optical switches from Flaretech. We chose models that would feel similar to Cherry Blue switches. Cherry Blue is used here as reference. Here are the 4 switches we'll be using in this comparison. Box switches have brand new structure designs, and have IP56 waterproofing and dustproofing. The actuation point is formed by cross-point contacts. Box separates the inner part into upper region, middle region, and lower region. The upper region is the sound chamber. The sound is controlled by a torsion spring. The middle region is the switch stem. The lower region is the trigger recognition area. The default installation includes a dustproof cover, and the trajectory and keystroke of the switches are controlled by the column and the green pushrod. The optical switches basically have the same structure as the Cherry switches. However, the spring plate and the contact point are both removed and replaced by the through-hole column. The light sensor component in the PCB sends the signal when activated. We are now done with the basics. Let's have a look at the appearances and parameters. Cherry Blue switches and RGB Blue switches, everyone is already familiar with them. We will all skip their introduction. Cherry Blue switch actuation is 2.2 mm. The total key travel is 4 mm. The peak force occurs at 1.8 mm. The pressure is 60 grams, and the life expectancy is 50 million keystrokes. Box switches, like the name, have a box shape. The size is a bit bigger than the Cherry switches, with a larger stem, and surrounded by dust-proof sides. It has an aggressive but calm look. Box White's actuation point is 1.8 mm. Total key travel is 3.6 mm. The peak force occurs at 1.8 mm. The pressure is 55 grams. The life expectancy is 80 million keystrokes. The appearance of prism switches is basically the same as Cherry. Slim light conducting strips are on the upper right corner of the stem. Actuation point is 1.8 mm, and total key travel is 4 mm. The prism orange switches have an actuation point of 1.5 mm. The pressure is 50 grams, and the life expectancy is 100 million key presses. The Libra switches have a quite exaggerated appearance. It's wide and has a thick stem. Each switch has a stabilizing bar. Wide light strips are at the top of the switches. The switch actuation point is 1.5 mm. The total key travel is 3.5 mm. The tactile peak has a pressure of 50 grams. The life expectancy is 100 million keystrokes. With respect to the appearance and designs, the box switches are the most innovative. The design to separate the switch housing is quite innovative. While being innovative in every area, it is still a normal size. So when adopted, there's no need to redesign the keyboard. Compared to it, the Libra switches have some innovative points, but it changed too much in the appearance and the size, and it can't be used as a replacement when necessary, which is limiting with respect to its parameters. All 3 of them have better click feel than Cherry and longer life expectancy. The no-metal contact structure of the optical switches makes it a much longer life expectancy than Cherry switches, but is less advantageous than the box switches that have metal contacts. The design of the Cherry Blue is a rather long tactile length and actuation point, which makes it not suitable for fast and continuous typing. The other 3 switches all make the tactile length shorter and the point a bit higher, especially the box switches. The use of a torsion spring and the special design of the tactile point make the tactile length really short and the position higher. Continuous tapping is more efficient on box switches and produces a beautiful sound with the most efficiency. We are now done with the appearance and parameters. Now let's compare the stability, where the Cherry switches have an advantage. Many of you are aware that the Cherry has small gaps between the switch shell and the stem when compared to other switches. The stability has always been the Cherry switch's advantage, and the box switches are said to be the only switches that are more stable than Cherry. There are no rumors around the optical switches in this currently, so let's compare them now. After the installation of the keycap, without pressing down, we have tried to apply a slight pressure around the edge of the keycap. The shaking of the Cherry is relatively small. The box switches have smaller gaps and larger stems, as well as the handles around the stem. So the amount of movement is less than the Cherry. The amount of movement with the optical switches is larger. The Libra optical switches, even though every switch is installed to the balancing bar, the amount of shaking is still a lot. which is the most among all. Following is the stability comparison when pressing down. Due to the large tactile length of the cherry, there is some degree of shaking, and some degree of shaking when pressing down from the edge. The box switches stay very stable when testing, and stay stable when pressing from the edge. The optical switches are quite stable when pressing down. However, there is some shaking when pressing from the edge. Libra optical switches have obvious movement when pressing from the center and the edge, and there is some friction when felt when pressing from the edge. To summarize the stability, the box switches have claimed the name as more stable than cherry switches, and the two optical switches have no advantages over cherry. The stability of switches is very important when applied to the larger keys. The stability of box switches gives the box a lot of advantages when used on larger keys. Outstanding performance and feel can be seen from all keyboards that use box switches. At last, let's compare the tapping behaviors. The cherry blue is called the spring of mechanical keyboards. It has a beautiful sound, it's clicky, it has a sharp bump, and it is smooth. However, its keystroke is quite long, and with a large tactile length. It performs well with a small amount of tapping, however comes up a bit short with continuous tapping. Box switches apply the torsion spring to control the sound, which is plucked like a string, and is beautiful and smooth. It is quite linear, and has an average tactile sense. However, the tactile length is small, and the position is quite high. The behaviors of continuous tapping are superior. In addition, Kaihua once mentioned a concept of CR scores in the promotion materials of the box switches. With respect to the behavior adjustments, the box switches are aiming for a CR score of 25% to 35%. If you are interested, you can take a look at the concepts and principles of CR scores. The prism switches have a similar tactile sense and sound to box switches, but the sound is more subtle. The tactile length is longer, and is very smooth. It has an average click. The length of the tactile point is also average. The position is a bit more forward than cherry, and perform better than the cherry in continuous tapping. The Libra switch's tactile feeling is produced by the contact between the plastic shell and the switch center. The sound is produced by a special hit hammer. The sound is related to the keystroke speed. The faster the keystroke, the bigger the sound, and the slower the keystroke, the lighter the sound. With respect to the linearity, the Libra switches are just so-so. The friction can be felt from the rattling and the edge contact. The click and tactile length are both average. The tactile position is basically the same as the prism switches. However, because of the big gaps in instability, the click is greatly reduced during continuous tapping. There's little friction when tapping and is very smooth. With all the comparisons finished, based on the comparison results, we can see the reason why people like the box switches and the optical switches. The box switches are outstanding in stability and performance, and have interesting designs, and live longer than the cherry switches. Even though the two optical switches have some instability and worse performance, they are both strong in linearity and continuous typing repeatedly. Using optical sensors makes their life expectancy longer, and due to the fact that light travels faster, the reaction speed is also faster. Nevertheless, the market favorite cherry blue switches, except the fact that the tactile length is too long for continuous tapping and short life expectancy, it has rather moderate and stable performance in other areas. Based on the comparisons, box switches are quite prominent, and outstanding in every area. The optical switches, even though they have some advantages in life expectancy, the use of infrared radiation increases the energy cost. Therefore, a bigger current is needed. So from the perspective of energy saving, is the increased life expectancy of optical switches still attractive? We have reached the end of this video. For more information on keyboard switches, please subscribe to us. See you next time.